Hi, my name's Brad Moggridge. I'm currently the Program Manager of the Aboriginal Water Initiative with the New South Wales Office of Water. I'm a Kamilaroi man from northwest New South Wales, and I also am a scientist by training in environmental and also hydrogeology. So I spoke today at the symposium about the cultural value of water and the Aboriginal Water Initiative, which I'm managing at the moment. Discussed the importance of water to Aboriginal people, looked at what is important for Aboriginal people and water, and the history of the water. What are their values and connections to water? They're strong, they're old, they're deep, and I think that Western science can get a lot out of the value of what Aboriginal place on water. I then introduced the Aboriginal Water Initiative, which I'm currently managing, and discussed what my role is and what the aims of the project are, looking at working against 2 performance indicators on water for native title and including cultural and spiritual economic values into water sharing plans, and and explained in the program how we're going to do that through a process of building the capacity of community or informing the community, and then working with them to look at what values are important and water dependent, and then try to ensure that the New South Wales Office of Water can protect those values.
First of all, I'd also like to acknowledge traditional owners of this land, thank them for allowing me to be here today, and all of you guys, and hopefully we can get some positive outcomes and good discussion happening. Identity is crucial for Aboriginal people. I always ask a question, and I should have a question mark, sorry, but I want you to think about who you are and where you're from, how far you can go back, how many generations. So that's Kamilaroi country is that diagram on your left. It's a fairly large nation. My grandmother there, she was born right at the top of that country. She just turned 94, so we're lucky to have her still. I suppose thinking about where you are and where you're from, like I identify as Aboriginal first. You say, well, a lot of people say, well, you don't look black, but I suppose it's, Moggridge is an Old English name. I can go back to 1032 in Suffolk. My Aboriginal side, I can probably go back 40,000 years, so that wins. It's easy. It's my argument. Nan is, as I said, her bones are weary, but her mind is still strong and her history is still there. Mum, so there's 4 generations there. There's Mum, she's one of 14, so Nan and Pop were quite busy. I'm one of 37 grandchildren. That's my son. I also have a daughter. He's one of 90 great-grandchildren. And then there's a 5th generation. There's about 70 great-greats. So we're up around, last count a couple of years ago, there's over 200 descendants from Nan and Pop. So she's done well. On your right is Boobra Lagoon, which is part of my dreaming, and it's where it's like a rainbow serpent. You've probably heard of something like that. It's the Gadiar, that's where he lives, and you don't want to be there after dark. So that's our story. Cultural value of water. It's something I'm very passionate about. Australia's first people, we're still here, climate change and all. Probably a few different climates we've been through. Our ability, especially in the arid zone, Australia is 70% arid, to understand the Australian landscape and survive, I think is pretty amazing. Traditional knowledge of the driest inhabited continent on Earth is I think is pretty amazing. And to survive, I think, there was a precise classification system, and water sites were a key, especially in the interior, where the fresh water was rare and groundwater was the big one. So it's quite important that knowing where sites were and then refining those sites. So, the in a dry landscape is quite important. But unfortunately, Aboriginal people are not part of the Western equation in identifying how, when and where water flows in Australia, especially in a regulated system. We're all trying to mimic natural flows, but traditional knowledge has the potential to inform that. We're not part of it. As Jody said, I have infiltrated the system, so I'm trying to make sure that we are part of the debate. Being trained in Western science has allowed me to work in some governments and also at CSIRO. So 3.5 years at CSIRO. I'll talk about a report later that we just released. But the dilemma I had is that first question you had about, social sciences and physical sciences. And so I'm trained in physical science, but I deal with human values. And I've been told to get out of the social science space, but they're my people's values. So where do I fit? That's a big challenge for me. These are just some of the cultural values that, that are water dependent in the landscape. I won't go through them all, but a lot of them, there are physical and non-physical sites. So defining what water needs of these values can be tricky, especially for the non-physical sites. The physical sites can be, if it's a certain flow is needed at a certain time of year, that's quite easy. You open the dam wall and order the water and the dam releases it. But if it's a spiritual site, how do you measure that? Or if it's related to fish or river red gums, those are measurable. So that's the challenge of, I suppose, modern day science, just trying to work out how to get water to some of these sites that are important. The next shot, I did a bit of a mud map of Aboriginal water. It's quite simple. Just looked at all the pressures, all the influences, the opportunities. Did you get all that? Sorry. It's just something I wanted just to try and explain how complex it is. It's not about Aboriginal people just going down to catch a fish or have a swim. There's a lot more issues, and there are opportunities, but they're limited. But I suppose it is changing. The blue bubbles sort of represent the major areas, and then everything sort of interlinks with it. But there are double ups. But I purely did that for these sort of gatherings. The value of water, Aboriginal people, it's sacred. It's deep and necessary survival. It's protected by traditional law and customs. And connection to country does not separate the individual aspects of the landscape. So currently we have water separated from land in non-Aboriginal society, and a lot of the old people don't understand why that happens, because without water you don't have a healthy land, without healthy water you don't have a healthy people, you don't have healthy culture. So they're all interrelated, but currently we manage in the silos. The cultural and economic values associated with water are poorly understood. So in Northern Australia there was some research done through the TRACK program where they looked at what was important for Aboriginal people, and they looked at what the water planners were actually planning for water. And barramundi in Northern Australia is quite strong as a key species, but that was 5th on the Aboriginal people's list. So the black bream and the long-necked turtle were the top 2, and they're quite susceptible to changes in flow. So the planners were thinking that barramundi was what we got to protect, but with the local Aboriginal people, barramundi wasn't the key species. So, and then I just put in an example there that one echidna, which is like a porcupine for our people from overseas, it may equal 3 yellow bellies, which is a freshwater, like a cod, I suppose. So this poor understanding leads to poor allocations and entitlements, and that's, I suppose, where we're at currently. Aboriginal people are critical of managers for just looking to satisfy ecological criteria, environmental watering, and a lot of them do consider that, without asking Aboriginal people, that cultural values will be considered in environmental flows, but they're not. Bit of a word break. This is out on the Hay Plain, sort of southwestern New South Wales. It's Aboriginal-owned property, and they've actually purchased it and they're managing it currently. And this is a photo looking west, and then I turn 180 degrees, and that's like a different landscape, but it's actually just turning on the spot. And they've created this wetland for cultural and environmental benefits. It's an Indigenous protected area, so it's part of the National Reserve Estate. It's on the Murrumbidgee catchment, and they have paid $16,000 in fees to create this environment. So, and they have environmental water going past their land in the Murrumbidgee River that they can't access, but they're paying for water to generate this special place. So I suppose they talk about inequity. I suppose that's the big inequity that we see. I'm currently the program manager of the Aboriginal Water Initiative. We got lucky to get some money in tough times in government for up to 4 years to improve the engagement of Aboriginal people in water planning. And so we're fresh. June we had 4 positions. Hopefully have a few more. So our aim is to work around 2 performance indicators. They're similar to the National Water Initiative, which our COAG, which governments have signed off on. And we're looking at providing water for native title, and then recognising spiritual, social, customary and economic values of water for Aboriginal people. So economic doesn't usually find its way into these sort of discussions. Aboriginal people want to engage in the economic aspects. Some people just want fish in the river. So it just depends. They want to look at opportunities with water, just have the same values or same rights to water as everyone else. We do it in a 2-stage process. We do a bit of a workshop and explain what is water planning. Water planning is quite complex. We produced the document, which is the cover on the left, Our Water, Our Country. It's a resource tool with a DVD, and it explains water planning. It's made for Aboriginal people to understand water planning. And I think it's a very good tool that can be downloaded off our website. But it's a great tool for communities, and it will be ever changing. And then after the workshops, we then go back and talk to the communities, talk to the knowledge holders about what values are important that are water dependent. We look at cultural values, the high priority ones, why they're important, and then we look at if there are rules in the water sharing plans, the legislative instruments that manage water, how they can meet the needs of those values, and then also hopefully around decision making around when waters are released, times, flows, volumes, even temperature is important. And as I sort of said earlier, that without this information, these values would be just lumped in with environmental assets. We have a report card, so we look at it's a pro forma that we work with the community on what they want to put in their information. It's adaptable, it's changeable. We look at the health, the threats, what information is out there, and some of the management options, and also the water requirements. If the community believes that at a certain level, we can look at gauge data to see what sort of levels have been over the years. So, and if with permission, we actually take some photos and GPS coordinates. This information is collected. Is collected to pretty much inform decision making. So, just another word break. I was like word breaks. On the left is the Brewarrina fish traps on the Barwon River in northwest New South Wales, about 800 or 900 k's from here, northwest. They're reported to be potentially 40,000 years old. So, they were created through a dreaming story by Ami. He's the creator in that part of the world, and he saw that there was a famine, and he got his 2 sons to actually create these fish traps for the people. And there's pens all throughout they're called pens, and when it floods, they're all covered up. But when the river starts dropping, that's when it's time the fish will start getting into the traps. On the right is Thurmey Lakes, which is just southwest of Sydney, not too far away. It's a groundwater dependent site. It's culturally significant, and you can sort of see the sand in the bottom left, and the water level should be well above that, but currently there's longwall mining happening very close. So I don't know, 1 + 1 equals water gone, and that was part of a report I did, and that's and as a report card, you'd say that's heavily threatened in the report card, and it's under stress. What we do is with the cultural information is we work with the knowledge holders, and we have an agreement that we work with them about what they agree to provide and how we use it. It goes into a database only accessed by Aboriginal staff. There's also protections around men's and women's business, so I can't look at the women's stuff. I'd be in trouble if I did. And it's ideally, and from that information, we can then generate information for the water planners to say, there's a dot in the map in this part of the world, you need to protect it with this water quantity, potentially, or you just need to put rules in around to protect that site, especially if it's groundwater. So no new works in that, in like the setbacks. Licensing also, and then once we review the water sharing plans later on, we'll see how those values are protected. The gaps, there's still a large amount of gaps. Everyone in this space, the Indigenous water space, there's a lot of gaps. Everyone keeps talking about the gaps rather than filling them. There's review after review about how many gaps there are. So, and one of our key aspects of government is closing the gap. So this is a knowledge gap in water values of Aboriginal people, and there's opportunities that may go back to CSIRO once I tick these boxes and make a difference in this space. But to be look at a cultural flow and environmental flow. Aboriginal people always say that a cultural flow will give you everything environmental flow gives you, but more, because it's got that human aspect, not just the flora and fauna. There's a severe lack of quantitative data, the uses and needs, very few collection, case-specific investigations, and also the cultural economy is important to Aboriginal people. They don't have the big reports that other sectors have, so they can't bang on the table like the miners, and no big glossy maps. And I suppose while I was at CSIRO, I tried to generate something, and we did a report with the Nyempa people out at Brewarrina, so where the fish traps were. We looked at what the values were for those people for two parts, two water dependent sites, so the fish traps in stream, and then off stream is the old Mission Billabong, which is a series of billabongs, a deep water hole where traditionally they used to go when the river was dry, and then worked with some hydrographers to actually measure what water needs these two components needed. So it was actually quantifying the cultural values. So I suppose it's a start, it's one, and hopefully it'll generate some interest and more research. Thanks. It's me at the Queanbeyan River.